Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
As you're looking to grow your company, take on new customers, and understand the best ways to nurture relationships towards new sales deals, then understanding the funnel and your pipeline is mission critical. Welcome to Managed Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell.
I'm Rachel Anderson.
And today we're talking about the marketing funnel. So Rachel, the marketing funnel, the sales funnel, the pipeline, this can all be really confusing for many leaders. How do you get it straight?
Yeah, this is a great place for us to start. So just really defining some of these terms is going to set you up well to think about them as they matter for your business. So the first is that pipeline is really a totality of a process where you get new customers all the way through to closing the deal. And so that becomes your pipeline. And you can think of that as who's in the queue to potentially become a customer. And so that is how you look at your pipeline. Pipeline usually spans both marketing and sales. And if there's any other part of the company that plays an important role in making someone a customer, they would also be part of that overall pipeline discussion. So that's really pipeline. And as part of pipeline, you have something that's called a funnel. And it's called this because back, when it first got started, there was a very linear process for finding people. And you would have a huge group of people in one place, whether that was a person in a store seeing an advertisement, or that was everybody driving by a billboard. And so you'd have a huge group of people that you would find. And as you move them through the funnel, then they would self-select out based on the information that you present to them. And so that's still very true today in how we do marketing. It just looks really different. And so a lot of organizations will sort of classify their funnel in different ways. Sometimes you talk about a marketing funnel. Sometimes you talk about a sales funnel. Sometimes companies structure it where all of those things are together. And so we'll talk a little bit about basics of what you can kind of classify the funnel stages as. But really, as you're thinking about pipeline versus funnel, just think about pipeline is the overarching activity of nurturing someone from I don't know you exist into I'm a dedicated customer. And the funnel is basically how you go about doing that. And that can be broken up into lots of different kinds of funnels that fit within one pipeline.
I think that makes a lot of sense. It's probably the best definition I've heard. How would you decide on activities based on that funnel or that pipeline?
Yeah. So that's really the next step question is, so what do I do with that? So when you're thinking about a funnel, I'm going to start with the marketing funnel because that's where a vast majority of my expertise lie. It's the place that you start. So first you have awareness. Does the potential customer or the prospect know that you even exist? Does it know that your potential solution exists? Because really, people are only going to buy something if it solves a problem for them, right? So you're really asking the question, do they even know I'm here? Hence, awareness. And there's going to be activities that you can specifically do that help with the process of becoming aware that your company or product exists. So that is the first stage. The second stage is really about consideration. Now that they know that you exist or your product exists, how do they consider if you're a good fit for them? So this is a little bit of us versus them. Like, okay, well, maybe it's Microsoft versus Google when you talk about Word documents, right? Which platform fits best for my business? So those are the kinds of things that you would sort of have within consider. And then it really comes down to decision. So now they're saying, okay, I do think you are the best fit for me, for my problem, or your product is the best fit for me. So do you have the technical requirements for me to make this decision? And those are different assets that kind of go through all of that. And then I really think it's important to add one final thing, which is technically all the way at the end of your pipeline. So the very last thing you would do, which is after they become a customer, there is retention. And retention is a critical part of the funnel that I think really doesn't get enough attention and discussion about. So I really like to say that those are the 4 main parts of the funnel. Now, you can break down the funnel in a lot of ways. For example, if you talk about the sales funnel, they're going to have different classifications of what that looks like. Maybe you're talking about a marketing qualified lead. That's something that marketing is like, hey, it came through our funnel. We think it's like a good lead for the sales team. They as a customer profile, fit all the boxes, check all the things. So we're going to send it off to the sales team to start having more serious conversations. And then from there, it becomes a sales qualified lead, which means that the sales team also looks at that and says, yep, you're right. It checks all our boxes too. We're going to continue down, the path and get them into that decision bucket and really talk about the technical aspects of our company or product. So there's different ways that different teams or organizations might break down what that funnel looks like, but all of them will basically follow the model of awareness, awareness, consideration, decision, and then ultimately retention.
I think one of the most important things, which doesn't get talked about quite enough, although it probably does at marketing meetings, is how much drop off you have between each of those phases of the funnel and why the top has to be so large and why your reach out originally for awareness has to be so big, and why that's worth the investment.
Yeah, that is a really good observation. So there are some good best practices, industry kind of standard numbers that if you wanted to really refine how you look at that overall number and kind of back into things, you would be able to have a pretty good gauge on how much drop off you have. So one really good example is webinars. So one of the things I recommend when talking to different companies about their funnel and their funnel activities is what is the purpose of the thing you are doing? So sometimes webinars are very high level. It's just like, hey, here's where we are as a company, or here's a product demo. And that might be 2 different purposes. Maybe that's just to bring awareness that you exist, or maybe that's so that you can consider the company as an active player. And so that asset or that production of the webinar can fit into different parts of the funnel depending on the purpose with which you are producing it. So in this instance, webinar specifically as an activity or a medium tend to only have about 30% sign up rate to viewing rate. And that includes both live participants and post watches. So kind of more of that webcast formula. So if you have 100 people who sign up, it would be a job well done if you got 30 of them to actually attend. And then from there, people that actually take action afterwards are still only about 20%. So you're really backing down pretty significantly. So if your goal is to get 1 new customer, and caveat for those, kind of listening to us right now, I'm going to make up some of these percentages because it can really vary based on your activity and your company and what you're doing and the purpose and the topic and just so many variables. But this will give you actually an illustrated example to your point, Katrina. So if you want 1 new customer, maybe you know that it takes 5 sales conversations from that webinar in order to get 1 customer. But in order to get 5 sales conversations, you have to have 30 people on the webinar listening. And in order to get 30 people on the webinar listening, you have to get 100 people to sign up. And in order to get 100 people to sign up, you have to have 1,000 people that hear about it. Right? So you can really start backtracking until the very beginning where you say, okay, great. Well, then in order for us to know that we'll hit our sales goals, we have to get 1,000 people in, this month or this week or this activity to actually take action in order for us to hit the next step that hits the next step that hits the next step. So that's really an important way to think about the funnel and kind of even your activities within that to really back up into why is this important?
Right. It's so important because I think a lot of times people say, well, we don't want to spend the money to get in front of that many people. We only need this many people to come. And, you forget that there's a drop off from the amount of people who see it to who signs up. So why is, I think that's probably a good example of why understanding the funnel is important, but why else is understanding the funnel really important for leaders?
Yeah, the funnel is so important because it can really be an important key performance indicator for your company. And I know we've talked about this a little bit in other podcasts. If you've been listening to us for a little while, KPIs, it can also be a metric. So, understanding the funnel allows you to determine both specific KPIs and where your metrics can have significant milestones. So that exact same example of where we backed it up through the funnel, so that one customer is the 5 demos, which is the 30 attendees, right? Each of those are not actual metrics. If you are attaching them to goals, they should be key performance indicators. Your goal is to have, $10 in sales. And so, in order to get $10 of sales, you need to have one new customer. So those two things could be both KPIs and metrics, but the rest of them aren't great metrics because they don't help you achieve the actual goal, but they can indicate to you if you're going to achieve that goal. And so when you're looking at your overall funnel, if you see that you're consistently unable to reach those 1,000 people to even get them started, then you know that you need to amp up your activities in that awareness part of the funnel. People aren't finding you. So then you need to do maybe more paid ads, or maybe you need to go to more conferences where you can interface with people. If you're seeing that, not enough people are actually signing up for your webinar, they're getting eyeballs, but they're not actually signing up, then maybe that consideration piece, like that's where they are in the funnel, and your story's not strong enough. You need a stronger message that compels them to understand how you truly are a solution to their problem, and that's why they need to come into this webinar. And on we go, right? All the way down into consideration and retention. So those really significant KPIs can have direct effect on where you spend your time, your resources, even forecasting out where your hurdles might be in actually achieving your revenue or quarterly goals.
I love that you tied it back to our KPI episode. So everyone should definitely go back and listen to that one because this is a really good example of why setting the right KPIs is important and understanding the difference between your KPIs and your overall metrics. This has been the funnel edition of Managed Chaos Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.